Okay, so I'm gonna talk about this now. I haven't. I've been wanting to. I've been wanting to, or feeling like I need to, but I haven't. Because I also haven't wanted to. It's hard, but so are most of the conversations I have on these videos, and I think I kind of held back for a while because the last time I tried to communicate these things openly to anyone was last winter, and people like we were just chilling and talking, started talking about some dark things, and I like even gave a preemptive warning. I thought about the nature of the conversation, but as soon as I got into it, the dude that I was talking to multiple different people, but the dude that was next to me was like, "Whoa, I was not prepared for that, and I don't think I can handle this conversation." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, of course." No, I don't blame you. I hadn't even like realized. It's very easy for me to not realize how triggering many of the things that I talk about can be for people that aren't used to hearing people talk about these things. I've been through so many different things in so many different ways and been exposed to so many things that like I have become desensitized. It is healthy to not be able to handle these types of things, I think. But at the same time, um, they are things that need to be discussed because they're things that are actively happening. And if we aren't discussing these things openly, that's the entire shadow that's left for these things to happen under, really dark shit. Like that's the way that people get away with things, is because we don't talk about this stuff, or because so often, especially in the realm of like, Satanism and stuff, like it's glorified, and through media and movies and stuff like that in such a way that I don't think people even realize the full reality of things. And I think that even when it's like presented to them that these things are a reality, it's very hard for people to actively process because they're so used to experiencing these things through movies and media, music, whatever, instead of like becoming aware of the fact that like these are real world issues. I think, like I said, that it's healthy that these things are incredibly hard for people to process. Um, it's hard for me to process, even having experienced so many different things, or received so many of different kinds of information about this stuff, and like that's why I guess I've become desensitized in ways. I'm at the point now where I'm actually starting to be able to not be desensitized. I'm starting to sensitize myself. I'm starting to become more involved in the emotional aspects of these realities so that I can confront them and so that I can talk about them, to help other people become aware of them. And, it's taken an extremely long time for me to get to this point. And I've had to process these things for years and years and years, and like for so long, and so many things. And it's been wild. And I am definitely not going to be able to get into all of it in this video. There's two specific subjects I want to discuss. Subjects being people, more or less. And I probably won't even be able to talk about all of those things either. Obviously, the way my videos work, it sucks because my phone only has so much capacity and capabilities. So I'm just going to try to fit as much as I possibly can in there, just to I guess, start the conversation going. Thankfully, I already, in the past videos that I posted, did talk about black magic and technically Satanism. They're not one and the same always, but tend to the same types of people that are engaged in those things tend to engage in both and different stuff like that. But they often are very much intertwined. in different ways. And I'm not really going to be able to get into the theology of a lot of these things either. I just want to be able to continue the conversation. But this is a fair warning, because I'll probably just start getting into things and then won't give a warning as I'm talking. So like the trigger warning is that I'm going to be talking about Satanism. I'm going to be talking about black magic again. I'm going to be talking about ritual abuse, child sex abuse, crimes against children, crimes against people, murder, even cannibalism. So they're hard things to hear. Most people, when I've tried to talk about any of these things, either have asked me to stop or have not been able to actively process these things through a scope of reality. You know, they immediately go into like making jokes about it or passing it off as some form of non-reality, or that I even myself must be crazy to be able to talk about these things. And I get it. If that's you, then maybe these videos just aren't for you, you know. And if for any reason you feel like these aren't things you can actively process, it's not helpful for you to actively engage in this type of information. I'm putting this information out there for those that need to be in the know, and for those that have the capacity to be able to use these things for the benefit and safety and security of others. There's people that are watching me, you know, that have been close to me, that watch with malicious intent, more or less. You know, they want to just, at the very least, see what I know to see how to protect themselves or whatever, you know, and whatever it is that they're doing. Or to, you know, try to catch me up in the stuff that they've been involved in and stuff. And like, I'm just going to do my best to be as honest as possible, to explain things from my perspective, my experience. And that's about the best I can do. Okay, so in the videos that I talked about when it came to black magic, I talked about how like I'd kind of already been initiated into different things as a child, specifically through my brother and his friend, you know, that I can recall when I was a kid, like them engaging in witchcraft and using me as the muse. And they did it, you know, they were like 12, 13, just started smoking pot and stuff, like listening to ICP and Eminem even back then, I guess. And maybe not Eminem yet, but like, you know, Slipknot and Cannibal Corpse and different stuff, whatever was popular back then for them. But they started getting into that type of stuff, the alternative dark stuff. And back then, all of that stuff was kind of really new, all of that really dark, depraved stuff, in the form of media and popularization. Most of the people that got into those things did engage in criminal activities of different sorts, you know, doing whatever drugs and having whatever sex and maybe being pyromaniacs and stuff like that. And many did start engaging in different types of witchcraft, but it was part of kind of a culture or a counterculture. It had been popularized in different ways. It wasn't something that people theologically always took so seriously, but the nature of much of that stuff, especially when it comes to witchcraft, Satanism, different types of dark arts, the occult in general, even if you're going about it as innocently as possible, or even if you're going about it as a child, in and of itself, those schools of thought, you know, the mystery schools are forms of initiation. And you are engaging in a deep theology that you likely don't understand or aren't even fully able to process at the time, but that doesn't mean that you're not actively engaging in it. And so that's really the danger of those things, especially when it comes to children and stuff engaging in it. You know, so like I remember my brother one time apologizing to me for having used me the way that he had, and he, you know, told me some of the things that he had done, like, you know, putting certain stuff under my bed, or, you know, writing my name in candles and burning different candles or things, or like doing stuff while I was asleep, different stuff like that. he was like, we thought that it was a joke. We used you because you were innocent. Like, we didn't really realize what we were doing. And I feel really guilty about it now because I realized that like I probably did. And we like laughed about it at the time even because like we still didn't fully take it seriously. But he's like, I probably did put some curses on you. But like he 100% did. But it wasn't even just him. I mean, we'd kind of already been ourselves initiated into certain types of things because of the religious indoctrination that we'd been under as kids. And I mean, as an adult, like I can't even openly talk about a lot of those things because I still don't know the details. So I'm not going to just like throw shit out because I feel a way about it. But I question a lot of the things that were going on in regards to that anyways. But I guess that's a different, I mean, it's whatever. It's something different because I don't really have the facts about it. But so I was already kind of initiated into those things and into those concepts. And, and like my brother started getting into conspiracies and stuff, like into the occult and into trying to learn about secret societies and different types of things like that. And even like MK Ultra, that was a big one. And for him, it was when he was as young as 12 and 13, maybe 14, when he really started getting into it himself. But he's 5 years older than me. So I was very young and very impressionable as he was sharing all of those things with me, his beliefs about those things. We would research those things together. We were just children. Obviously, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. He didn't even know what he was getting himself into. But by the time that I was, an adult, it didn't matter that I hadn't actively engaged in those things myself. I became emo, and I did start cutting myself very young. I started cutting myself when I was 12, and then I started using a razor blade by the time I was 15, and which I think I talked about in different videos. Sometimes it's hard because I'm also making Facebook posts during this time, so it's like I don't know what information I'm putting out where. I don't really care. Just getting it all out there. But it's not that I don't care, but I digress. But I was kind of coming at things from a different level. Everything that I knew about the occult and about the dark arts and any forms of dark magic and anything like that basically had come either from all of the demonic, warnings that were given, or all of the different religious stuff through the Christianity we were raised with that like constantly talked about how the devil was in everything and always taught us about the devil, and so that we could like recognize the devil in things so that we could turn away from it, or it's like you're just creating the devil, but whatever. So that gave me quite an understanding, but then most of it was coming through my brother and the stuff that I learned through him. I wasn't actively pursuing any of those things or trying to understand those things. And I honestly, up until I was in my 20s, didn't take any of that stuff seriously. I looked at it, I considered myself a Christian. And so I kind of looked at everything else. And because of the way that I was raised, the type of Christianity that I was raised with, I kind of looked at everything else as essentially silly, wrong, not fully logical. Everybody else doesn't get it. I already have the truth, so I don't need to understand those things or go looking anywhere else. It was because of that ignorance that I ended up being so susceptible to these types of things, to be honest. That is the nature of the beast. But I didn't really understand these things or know how to take them seriously. So when I was 19, I met this dude through another dude at work. I worked at this rock shop that my parents, I had dreadlocks when I got dreadlocks when I started smoking pot when I was 16. I got dreadlocks when I was like maybe 17 or 18. And my dad hated them and ended up brushing them out. My stepdad insisted that I brush them out, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I was like, I'll cut him off. I'll shave my head. And he's like, you're not going to shave your head, because that was even worse. So he spent the time to sit and literally brush my dreadlocks out, which took, I don't know, like 6 to 8 hours. It probably took as long as it took to put the dreadlocks in as it did to take them out. But he sat there and brushed them out, left me with hardly any hair. My hair was fucked after that. There was just a big matted ball of the dread that he had taken out. And my hair was a mess. But he had done that because he was like, I want you to get a real job. I'd already been working multiple jobs at that point. And by multiple jobs, I mean even like 2 jobs at once, because I'd been working retail. But then I'm trying to think, because I ended up, I think I had lost my license from too many speeding tickets. There was a period of time that I wasn't working because it just wasn't convenient for me to work, because I didn't have my license. So they were tired of taking me to work. But then as soon as I got my license, he's like, okay, now you have to get a real job. So he brushed my dreads out. Well, I ended up getting a job at this like crystal shop, right? Like they sold like healing crystals and different hippie stuff. He was just like not happy about it. They immediately, I mean, they didn't stop me from it. I still worked there. I loved that job, but they bitched about it constantly. It's all witchcraft. It's all witchcraft. You're just bringing Satan in the house every time you bring anything home from there. It's a big thing. That's when they started calling me a witch. They started, believing that I was interacting with demons, that I was bringing demons in the house and stuff. Meanwhile, and like my mom had even said at one point where she was like, well, maybe it's because your brother did witchcraft in the basement. But like he actually was trying to summon demons and stuff in our basement. I was, just bringing home cool rocks. Like I learned this stuff in order to sell it, but I didn't even believe in a lot of that stuff at that time either. Like I kind of, to the people that I was close with, like I didn't judge it. When people really believed in it, I believe in whatever anybody else believes. Like I believe what I believe, but I've always believed, especially at this point when I was kind of moving away from Christianity, I believed that like whatever anybody else believes is no less valid than what I believe. I can't prove to anybody else that what I believe is more valid than what they believe if they can prove to me what they believe is true. So like, who am I to say, And so that's kind of where I was when I started getting that job anyways. And that's also why my parents were like, oh, it's all this stuff that's getting you away from Christ. Meanwhile, they were fucking going through money problems and taking my money from me and like, which, they had money problems and I had the money from my dad dying. So like, whatever, that's a whole nother subject. But, they were going through so much different shit than like, would be like, well, yeah, maybe we're affecting you, but like didn't really take into account how badly they really were affecting me at the time, or how badly I already was affected by things. They had no idea what the fuck was going on in my life. So things were just kind of crazy, I guess, already. They really were. And at that age, I had had my first boyfriend who I lost my virginity to. We dated for a year. And then after we broke up, I was celibate for a year. I felt very guilty for having, the reason I even had sex with him in the first place was because I convinced myself that as long as I married him, it would be fine if we had sex before marriage, because he would still be the first person I ever had sex with, and then we'd get married. I really just wanted to have sex. And I was willing to settle down with this dude who I wasn't even actually interested in, just because he was the one that was willing to have sex with me. So I was being fucking dumb. But by the time I started working at this place, I had been a celibate for a year and was still a porn addict. I'd been a porn addict from the time I was 12. And as soon as I started working at the mall, it was like there was just so many people there all the time. There was so much different interactions. Every single day I would have at least 5 different dudes ask for my number. And it was extremely overwhelming. And I kind of just went off the deep end. That was my slutty year. Slept with 12 different people that year. And most of those were just one night stands. And by one night, I mean like not even for a night. I literally just saw a dude that I was attracted to or somebody that I knew would be willing to have sex with me and would have sex with them. Sometimes on my lunch break, sometimes right after work. Uh, I dated two different dudes for a couple months apiece, up to like 4 months apiece. And the rest of it was all just very casual. And I just wasn't taking care of myself sexually at all. That's when my boss had brought up to me the sex addiction thing. And I don't know if I actually posted those videos or not, but it brought up the sex addiction thing to me. And that's when when I was 20, I started going to a 12-step program. During that time, during that year that I worked at that job, I met this dude through another dude that was friends with the girls that worked there. So it was me and like 4 other girls that worked there. So we had one male manager, but the rest of us were all females. And the girls had kind of always been affiliated, or they'd already worked, there for a couple years and stuff like that too. So there was like all the mall kids, all the people that worked at the mall, had their little cliques, and I became part of their clique, obviously from working there. So this dude who worked at a kiosk, like on the other side of the mall, was friends with these girls. He did massages or whatever. He's friends with the girls, and he brought in his friend. They had they'd just been to the Renaissance Fair. They were planning on going to the Renaissance Fair. And one of the girls that we worked with worked at the Renaissance Fair with them. So that's what they were talking about. And I had never been to the Renaissance Fair, but my brother and I had recently, within I think the last year, my oldest brother and I had started playing Morrowind together. And I absolutely loved it. And I always loved Lord of the Rings. I had been allowed to watch Lord of the Rings, and I always loved that. Morrowind allowed me to expand the lore of Middle Earth, and I loved that kind of stuff. So the Renaissance Fair piqued my interest. At the time, I was actually looking. I never LARPed. I always wanted to, but I was like actually open to finding people that were into that. And that's what caught my attention. They were talking about people LARPing at the Renaissance Fair. And I was like, you LARP? And the guy's like, or the one guy was talking to the girl. And so his friend had turned to me and was like, I mean, I have, whatever. He started talking to me. But then as soon as we started talking, we just hit it off on a really deep philosophical level. We started talking about the lore of different things, but he was also extremely engaged in just like magic as a concept. And that really piqued my interest. I was into theology, and I was open to theology at the time, and I hadn't met anybody who understood the theology of the occult the way that he had. So I was already inundated to those things, unaware of it. And when he was talking about those things, it just like clicked. And he really liked that. He really liked that I was so engaged and interested and willing. And I liked that he was so knowledgeable. So we became close friends very quickly. He would come in and see me. He took my number. We started talking all the time. He was interested in me, but I wasn't interested in him. I very much was interested in him, but not romantically. And he respected that, and I loved that. And it made me want to cling to that type of relationship, to be able to have a man that was close, that wasn't trying to be sexual with me, was huge and very rare. So I kind of put him on a pedestal for that. And he put me on a pedestal for basically everything else. And it did not take long at all for friendship just to take off. I mean, within the matter of a couple months, we were just talking all the time. We talked on Facebook. We wrote poems to each other. We wrote stories to each other. He wrote stories at the time, and I was writing stories at the time, but we both became each other's muses in different ways. We just encouraged the artistic and creative sides of each other in ways that nobody else had. And we could talk about dreams we talked about dreams all the time, and like my dreams were always super crazy and super in depth and very long and very like full of different symbols and stuff that everybody else is like, what the fuck are you even talking about? But he understood, and I understood him, and it was very rare for us to feel that type of connection with one another. So we became extremely intimate, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And he always pushed for a romantic relationship, and I always resisted. And throughout the course of our relationship, there were different ebbs and flows of that, where like sometimes he would get really frustrated about it and would kind of write me off for a short time and get mean with me, and then he'd come back around and be like, you know what, I'm sorry, you're right, like I don't deserve to be like that, we should just I want you in my life, I want you to be my friend, like I won't be like that. And we would be friends again for a while until inevitably those feelings would arise again. And it happened like maybe 4 times in the almost, I guess, 4 years, in the 4 years that we were friends. But the entire time too, he had this long-term girlfriend that he was on and off with, but like they'd known each other since they were kids, and they'd always just been the ones that were with each other. And like I think when they would break up, sometimes it was like he was like trying to pursue other people, and he always wanted to pursue me, and she knew about me, we had never met. Because she didn't want to meet me, she didn't like me, and I'm sure that that's because that's kind of how he set things up. He had always hoped that maybe if he didn't have her, that he could be with me, and then I would turn him down and he would get back with her. And it, that the romantic aspect of it was always a point of frustration for me, because that's just not what I ever wanted from him. And there were times that he made me feel like he understood that, and then there were times where I was like, do I have to remind you, like, come on, man. So things were never physical between us. I just always kind of knew that he kind of hoped that they would be, but he was being respectful of me, at least as much as he could be during the course of our relationship, to not push those things. But yeah, so he was really into like Ren fair stuff. He was also a juggalo. He had Ren with the hatchet very seriously. He had, my brothers and I listened to ICP, and we became like our own little crew about it. But we weren't juggalos. That has a specific connotation, and that you uphold the concepts of ICP like a certain way. We viewed it the same way, like in the vein, we had come from like listening to Weird Al and listening to like John LaHoy and different stuff like that, where like it was like comedy to us. So we were coming from a different aspect, but I still knew those things. So I guess that's where we were still able to connect about those things. But at the same time, I do think that he like did have a bit of frustration that I almost was disrespectful of his affiliations in different ways, because I wasn't a true, like Middle Earth nerd. I just played Morrowind and watched Lord of the Rings and was interested in those things, but I didn't dress up and go to the Renaissance Fair or do any of those things. At least at that time, I hadn't been exposed to those things. So he was a lot of that for me. I was very new to most of those concepts. And throughout the course of our relationship, and especially in his poetry and in his writings, he started, he was the one that taught me what a muse was. I didn't understand the concepts at the time, but like, he in his writings and in his poetry, he started using me as a muse, and I became a character in this world that he had created that was often portrayed through his writing and art. He's also an artist, and he had this whole like dark world with these characters that felt very real, but I looked at it all very artistically, like I was looking at it like, even when he used me as a muse, like it still seemed like these are metaphors for things, and they're metaphors for feelings that you're receiving from different types of people and different types of things. I didn't understand the reality of what it was that he was talking about at the time. I really did not understand his theology. I thought I did. I thought I did. I mean, we had such a deep connection, and he would tell me all the time that nobody else understood him like I did, but I didn't understand those things either. And he also knew that I didn't understand the reality of them. He used that to his advantage. He would incorporate me into these things, and like at the time I just took it all as like, even if the stuff was very dark, I took it like a metaphor, and like he was just expressing his feelings, and I knew that he was, he had a lot of dark feelings. But I'd been an emo kid. Like I didn't view it as like specifically telling of any actual reality he was experiencing necessarily. I mean, I knew that his life had been fucked up in different ways, and that he struggled with drinking, on and off. And I think he had done drugs prior, or maybe